Okay, guys, we are recording. This is week one of Hard Surface 1. We have done a bit of talking. You guys have got to know me better. Kind of talked about expectations about the class, what the class is about, all that fun stuff. Now we're down to business. As I said, we are going to be recording these classes each week, and I've asked that you guys do not distribute these videos in any way. These are just for you guys personally, and I will upload these within 24 hours after class. So now we've just opened up Maya. We're going to be using 2019 for the class. As I mentioned prior, if you guys are using 18 or even 17, you guys should be fine and be able to follow along just the same. So as we open up Maya, I'm not going to go deep into, just kind of the Maya interface and all that stuff. We do want to try to get in and just get right down to the very specific focus for the class and get you guys up to speed as quickly as possible. So everyone has taken an introduction to Maya class. I have had some students who they've been working in, say, 3D Studio Max. I've had some people that are like, oh, I've been using 3D Studio Max for 10 years, and now I'm trying to learn Maya. So there is a little bit of an adjustment when you are going from one program to another. So if once again, if I go over something too fast, or if I go to a certain tool, or if I execute something and you didn't pick it up, please stop me. I can go over those things again. I am going to be using hotkeys quite a bit. I'm also going to be using the hotbox. The hotbox is when we hold down the space bar inside of Maya. This little floating little window right here, this is the hotbox. I will be using the hotbox, or some people call it gesture controls. I will be using that a lot. Almost every single time I do something like that, I will be telling you what I'm doing. Almost to the point of like I even do it when I'm at work. I had a coworker that asked me, he was standing behind me and he was looking at what I was working on. He's like, "Oh, how did you do that?" And I was like, "Oh, you go up to this menu," or I started like walking him through the process, and he laughs, and I was like, "What's so funny?" He's like, "I can tell you're an instructor because I literally am like walking him through every single step to how to do it." But I do think it's important for me to repeat myself, letting you guys hear my thought process, even when it comes to different commands inside of Maya, because all that stuff will start sinking in over time, and I hope it does. So, Hotbox, we're going to be going over, and now we're already going to be talking, guys, about your first homework assignment. We're only in class for 45 minutes, and we're already talking homework. First homework assignment is I want everybody to create their own custom shelf. A custom shelf is going to help start increasing the speed of your working inside of Maya. So this is JTools right here. This is my shelf. You can see I don't have many buttons on my custom shelf because I find that I don't really need too many buttons on my shelf because I use the gesture controls so much. That's how powerful I think those gesture controls are. So I do have some basic ones that are up here. I do feel like they're nice to have up there. I don't have to go up there and click and then click and then click again. It's a one button done type of a deal. So the first homework assignment is to create a custom shelf. So I'm going to show you guys how to do that. I'm going to show you how to create custom buttons, how to delete custom buttons, rearrange buttons, all that fun stuff. So what you're going to do is you're going to come over here to the top left, up here right next to your shelf or a shelf. And usually what's going to happen is you're going to see like this, the polygon shelf here. So you're going to come over here. There's going to be a very small little gearbox there. You're going to click on that, and then you're going to come down to New Shelf. Clicking on New Shelf. How small is that font there, guys? Is that really, really small?
A little, yeah.
A
Yeah.
little too
It's
small?
small but legible.
All right. Well, I'll help you
Bigger would
guys.
be nicer.
Yeah, I'll help you guys out then. So I guess we can say this is tip number one here. I'm going to go to Windows, and then I'm going to go down to Settings and Preferences, and go to Preferences. Inside of here, I can change this. First one, Interface. I'm going to go all the way down to the bottom, and I'm going to go to Interface Scaling. I'm going to click on Custom. Right now it's set at 100, and I'm going to change that to 150, and I'm going to click on Save. Now the problem is it didn't do anything because I have to restart Maya. So let's go ahead and close that down.
Excuse
No.
me, James.
Yeah.
So you went to the, because I was trying to go full screen,
Sure.
create new shelf. Then did you enter the new shelf name?
Yeah, call it whatever you want. You can call it like A Tools for Alex Tools, or you can just call it whatever you want to call it.
And then you went to
Yeah, after you make your shelf name, I'm gonna do that for you guys in a second. Then that's when we should have just an empty shelf and we just start creating buttons. All right, guys, let's test this out. So we'll go here, new shelf. Is that any better?
A little.
Okay. I can go bigger. Take it to 200. We are going to take a break, guys, at about 1:30. I should have my alarm is going to go off at about 1:30. That will be our halfway marker in class. We'll always take a break, let you guys catch your breath, go get some water, food, whatever you guys got to do. I'm going to call my new shelf. I'm going to call this, I don't know, I'm going to call it Monkey. Monkey Tools. Click on OK. And now you can see I have a shelf now up here that is called Monkey Tools. So this is where we can start to keep any specific tools that we would want to add to this area. Even at work, when I'm at DreamWorks, I have like 3 separate shelves for 3 separate situations. I have my J tools that I have. I have one where I do model checks. I have another one where I'm doing UV checks. And I have some custom tools that are at DreamWorks. I have them all lined up on there. So it's almost like a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 type of a punch deal. So I hit button 1, it pulls up my window. I do everything I'm supposed to do there. I go to the next button, do everything I'm supposed to do there. Instead of jumping around all over across the top of DreamWorks buttons, trying to remember where everything is at. So it definitely can help speed up that workflow. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to quickly go through the different menus up on the top of Maya, and I'm going to point out some things that maybe you want to consider making buttons for. These are not mandatory in any way. They're just light recommendations that I think are useful. So we'll go ahead and start off with the File menu. And do remember, guys, as you guys are looking at menus, if you ever see a menu that has the double dotted line on top, you can always click on that double dotted line and it rips off that menu and you can have that menu floating around. Sometimes useful. Inside of files, I honestly don't think there's anything here that's worth creating a button for. Anything inside of here, it's so rarely chosen that I don't think it's worth a button. The main one is save scene as or save scene, and for those I just remember Control S or Control Shift S. Sometimes even for save scene as, I'll just go ahead and click that button. So nothing really to make a button for there. Edit, inside of edit, we should all know the undo is Control Z. That's just a good one to remember. It says redo is Control Y. I also will tell you guys you can also hit Shift Z will redo. So Shift Z is also undo. Copy, paste, all that stuff, all that will just go with everyone should know copy, paste is like Control V. The first button I would recommend that you guys make is the delete by type. Once again, delete by type, and we're going to go to history. So we're going to delete the history. Everything that we do in modeling is being recorded by Maya, every single operation. What can happen is that one object could have several different things that we've done to it. And if you don't kill that history, Maya will start to bog down. It could start to corrupt your file. So it's just good when I've gotten my object to what I feel is a good, comfortable, confident situation, I'll just go ahead and delete the history. So I'm going to go ahead and make a button. Make a button for delete history. I hover my mouse over the button, over the history, hold down Shift, Control, left mouse button. Once again, Shift, Control, left mouse button. Now if I look on my Monkey Tools shelf, I now have a little icon there that says History. We can modify that button should we want to. We can go ahead and hit right mouse button on there and go to Edit. When we click on Edit, what's going to happen is you're going to get an edit shelf, or the shelf editor. It's going to tell you what the command is. Also, more importantly, if you go to shelves, you'll be able to pick, maybe you want a new icon. You can pick a new icon should you want to. I don't go crazy with my icons, guys. I try to keep them pretty vanilla, pretty plain, because I'm not trying to turn my Maya user interface into an art project. Not saying that there's anything wrong with that. I have worked with a guy. Every single one of his icons on his shelf were all video game icons of some kind. I couldn't figure out how in the world he would know what any of the buttons do. The only one I could figure out is he had the icon of the dude from Mortal Kombat that has the freeze power. So that was his freeze transformation. It's the only one I could figure out. The rest were just crazy, crazy buttons. But whatever works, whatever made him feel good and happy to be in the world of Maya. So you can change that should you want. Other things that you can do is you can go down here and you can change the icon label. So right now, if we look up to the top left, it says HIST, history. You could change that to whatever you want, especially with scripts. If you have a script that you're using and you have a button for, that would be one you would want to put something useful in there so you know what that script does. Maybe it's a randomization script. So maybe put RAND in there, something to help you remember what the button does. You can also change the label color, the label background, the background transparency. So you can do a few things there. All of that is all personal preference. So let's go ahead and go back to our edit menu. Everything else we're going to be using hotkeys for, grouping, duplicating, we're going to be using hotkeys. Create, we'll be using all hotkey or gesture controls for this. One I would recommend that you guys do make a button for, if we go down to measure, distance tool. So I'm going to make a button for distance tool. Once again, Shift, Control, left mouse button. And now we look there, and we've got a little icon, little arrow with a T. So that's our distance tool. So I do like to talk about the distance tool quickly. With the distance tool, we are able to be really precise with the size of things inside of Maya. Most of the time, you won't have to be hyper precise. It will really be dependent upon where you're working and what you're working on. I have worked on projects like the Iron Man 2. They were super super serious about sizing there. Did some work on the Iron Man glove. So the Iron Man glove needed to be a very precise thickness because Robert Downey Jr. had to put his hand into the glove. So it needed to make sure that it was going to fit his hand properly. So it was really important for that. And also, too, another reason for thickness is if you're going to 3D print your objects. There's a certain parameter, a certain guideline that you have to stay within. If your objects are too thin, it could be a printing error. If it's too thick, then you're wasting your printing material. So there's a certain range that you want to work within. So the distance tool is great. We will be using the distance tool in this class to try to size up our objects as best as we can. So once again, that is a recommended one there. Create. Everything else we're going to be using hotkeys for, or gesture controls. Select. We're not going to mess with anything there in this menu. If we do, we'll just click on it. Under Modify, there are a couple buttons here I would recommend. First one being Freeze Transformations. So button, Shift Control, left mouse button. And another one is Center Pivot. Another button for that one. Shift Control, left mouse button. Anything else down here we're not going to mess with. Display. Turning the grid on and off, we can do that individually with inside of the viewport itself. So we're not worried with that. Heads up display. There is one that I'd recommend there. Once again, display, heads up display. This one is a high recommendation. I highly recommend creating a button for your poly count. Poly count is going to allow us to know how many verts, faces, edges are in our scene. Also will tell us how many of each of those we have selected in our selection process. So I use it primarily for that. And I keep my poly count window on probably 95% of the time. So I like being able to quickly glance up and see how many, say, verts I have selected. If we do look at that, I'm going to turn this on. And you can see now that's popped up in the heads-up display left of all my viewports. So yeah, it's really, really useful. Let's go ahead. That was under display. There's a couple others. If we go down to display polygons, this is another one I'd highly recommend. Border edges and edge width. Now, right now, some of these might not make sense to you, might not know what they are, but I do promise we will be getting to them, and when we do, I'll be referring you back up to that button because I will be using it. Everything else we're not going to mess with. Windows. I'm going to keep everything as it is. Outliner. Yeah, sometimes I'll make a button for the outliner. Depends on how much outliner work I'm doing. Usually when I'm working in a studio, I'll have an outliner button, just because outliner is really critical when you're working. Things have to be named properly, grouped properly, all that stuff. We will be talking about the outliner because I do want you guys to be comfortable with it. That will come later. We will be talking about Play Blast, but we don't need a button for it. As far as UI elements, we're going to take a little detour here on making buttons. Under UI elements, there's a lot of stuff on here. Status line, shelf, time slider, range slider, command line, help line. All this stuff, if you're working on a very, very small screen, let's say you're working on, let's go crazy, let's say a 13-inch laptop, right? Tiny little screen. Your screen real estate is extremely, extremely valuable. And I would try to get rid of as much as I possibly can when working in that situation. Even on my screen, I'm working on a 43-inch TV. I still don't feel like I have enough. I still want to try to get rid of a lot of extra stuff. So what I like to do is I like to turn off my time slider. So you can see I got a little bit more room down there at the bottom again. I'm going to actually rip off this shelf. So I like to turn off my time slider. I also like to turn off my range slider. I don't need to see that. Command line I keep up, and my help line, I'll keep that open also. Help line is really nice. If there is an error, you'll be able to see what the error it is, and you might be able to figure out how to fix that. Shelf, I always like to keep my shelves there for obvious reasons. Status line. Status line, I like to keep it on. That's a personal preference. If you really feel like you need all the space you can get, you can turn that one off. I like to keep it on. So the ones I like to keep on, status line, shelf, command line, and help line. And of course, toolbox also. Toolbox is very helpful. Let's go ahead and now go to Windows. I think we got through everything there. Windows, workspace, UI we talked about. Settings and preferences. Now we're going to take a detour while we're here. We're going to look at preferences of Maya. There are a few things I would recommend that you guys change. Make that nice and big. So we were already in here when we talked about the interface. I'm going to change that to 200. Then while on break, I'll restart Maya for us. That is totally up to you guys. If you guys are working on a small screen, sometimes the UI might be really tough to see, so you might want to consider changing that to something larger. The most like the highlights in here. The first one is going to be manipulators. I'm going to have to give you guys a demo on this one because sometimes when I talk about it, people get lost. So I'm quickly going to make a cube here. Now we are going to be making quite a bit of changes with our objects, of course, in modeling. And another thing that we're going to do to help us in that process is moving our manipulator. It's pretty powerful. I do it all the time. And because I do it all the time, this is why I've modified my preference. If we hold down D as in dog, you can see our manipulator changes. It changes from just the normal looking manipulator, and it changes to where there's these circles around our manipulator. This is not very useful most of the time. And when I say most of the time, I'm talking like 99% of the time. Because what can happen, we can quickly be trying to manipulate our manipulator, or changing the location of our manipulator, and we can accidentally rotate this manipulator, like I just did there. Now, you can see if we look at our orientation of our manipulator, the location has changed, but also the rotation has changed, which is not good. That's why I say, guys, most of the time, we will not want to rotate our manipulator. If I do need to rotate my manipulator, then I will turn this option back on. So once again, if we hold down D, that's when we see that rotation handles on there. To turn that off, you're going to go to Preferences, Manipulators. You're going to go down to Manipulator Plane Handles. Or I'm sorry, Pivot Manipulator. And you're going to turn that guy off right there. Now, with that turned off, if I hold down D as in dog, you can now see that the manipulator does change. However, we do not have the rotational handles on there. So that is a high recommendation there. So once again, that's manipulators, pivot manipulators, and turn that off. The next one I'm going to recommend is on settings. Under settings, working units. This is where you can choose whatever units that you want to work with. I like to work with inches myself. A lot of studios do like to work in centimeters. And also depending upon where you are in the world, most places use centimeters. You may want to just stay with centimeters. For me personally, when I'm working, I like to work with inches. I'm most familiar with inches. I can look at my hand, I can look at my finger. I know about like how big an inch is, how big a foot is. I can say, oh, a foot is about this big. Well, if I can visually see how big a foot is, if you told me like 325 centimeters, I'd be like, oh, is it that big? I would be totally lost. Or is it this big? So I need to use what's most familiar with me instead of going over to the internet, doing a conversion and doing all that. So I go with inches myself. So I change that to inches. If we go down through our list, let's go to undo. Now, because I just installed 2019, these are all default settings. I still have not even set up my usual things. Now, default undo is set to finite for your undos. Finite means an exact, and it is going to give you a undo amount of 50. I don't like having restrictions on my undos. That's why I set mine to infinite, so I can have an unlimited number of undos. Now, you might think that's silly. You might think, wow, 50 undos sounds like a lot of undos. Well, I've been in the zone. I've been modeling, deep into modeling, and all of a sudden I'll rotate around and I've accidentally modified something, or something didn't work the way that I want it to. And I just keep hitting that Control Z, Control Z, Control Z. And if I get to 50, then all of a sudden it's going to tell me, you are out of undos. And that's not when I am happy. So I will always try to change that. I have had Maya somehow Maya will revert back to default settings and it will go back to finite. And you can imagine how happy that makes me when I find out that that has been changed back. So I do check that to infinite. Another thing you guys may want to consider, and this is totally optional, this isn't even a high, excuse me, a high recommendation, but you can do an autosave inside of Maya. And if you choose to do an autosave, that's fine. Maya does crash. You guys have been using Maya for any length of time. Probably Maya has crashed on you. Sometimes Maya will give you a crash file, like almost like I like to say a quick save, like they call it in ZBrush. Sometimes it will give you a file that it has saved when it crashed. The problems with that is sometimes that file might have been corrupted during that crash, so it's not something that's reliable. And like I said, it's not even always will it have saved that file. Sometimes Maya will just vanish. You'll be working, and all of a sudden, whew, this disappears. So I have used autosave in the past myself, especially when I've worked in certain studios. It seems like their version of Maya was rather buggy. I will enable autosave. So there's a couple of things that I would recommend if you choose to use autosave. I would recommend prompt me before saving, because you'll know if it's going to save. Like it'll say something like getting ready to autosave. You can click on OK, or you can click on do not, and then you can just continue working. Also, too, I would recommend that you click on limit autosaves. So if you do not have this turned on, what's going to happen is under your intervals is set by default. It's set to 10 minutes. So every 10 minutes, Maya is going to save a new file. Every 10 minutes. If you do not have number of autosaves turned on, it is going to save files and files and files and files. So you can imagine if you're working on a very large scene or a very heavy scene. Let's say if you get up to a file size, let's say you're working on a monster scene, it's like 2 gigs of data. Every 10 minutes, it's saving 2 gigs of data. Well, over the course of 8 hours, if you're not versioning up, you have just eaten up quite a bit of your hard drive just in autosaves. So that's why I like to turn on limit autosaves, and I like to keep that at the default of 10. So what will happen is it will save through 1 through 10, and then once it gets to saving number 11, what it actually does, it goes back and it starts saving over number 1, and then rewriting over 2. So it's an overwriting type of a process. And then the last thing about autosaves is the destination. So you could keep it in your project that you're working in, or you could go ahead and click on named file or named folder. I like to go with named folder, and what I like to do is I like to create a location wherever my project is or wherever I want to save my autosaves. Let's say on my desktop, I'll go to my desktop and then I'll create a folder here that will be called autosaves. And then that's where I know my autosaves will be, because sometimes Maya might crash and you'll be like, oh, where was my autosaves at? And then you'll totally forget, and you'll have to spend and waste time trying to find where those autosaves are at. So why avoid, or it's best to avoid a situation like that and put them where you want them. So those are my recommendations for autosaves, should you want to use them. I usually don't use them myself because I'm a huge fan of saving my own files. I like to save when I want to save. I'm usually pretty good about keeping it in the back of my mind. I'll work, and then I'll be like, oh, you know what? This is a good place where I need to save. Saving is important, and versioning up is important. There's a difference between versioning up and just saving. Version up is going to make a whole new file. A save is going to overwrite that previous work that you've done. So be careful of if you're going to save or save as. Versioning up, that's what saving as is. When you version up, that's a whole new file, and I highly recommend that you guys get used to versioning up, because you don't know at some state in your work, maybe a file might get corrupt, or you might have to revert back to a previous version that you're working on. Usually the files that you're going to be working with aren't going to be huge, so it's not going to be taking up a lot of your hard drive. So I'm a big fan of versioning up. I've modeled a car before, and I've had probably like 75 different versions. I've had other models where I've had like 90 something different versions, version ups of that file. And it's not a big deal. When you finish a file, if you choose, what you can do is you can delete any files that you don't want, or sometimes what I'll do is I'll just zip them together, and I'll zip a certain amount of files together just to keep those just in case. I will do that especially with freelance projects. When I'm working on projects from home, doing work from home, I will always zip those files because maybe it's 2 months, maybe it's 2 weeks, maybe it's a week after you finish the project, and the studio comes back to you and they say, hey, we were wondering if you still have those files available, or we were wondering if you had that previous version available to us, because whatever the story might be. Like, yeah, sure, I can send that to you. And you send it off and you look like you're, a professional. You look like you're keeping track of your files. All good stuff. The next we're going to go to, actually, I think that's it. We already talked about undo. Yeah, that's it, guys. That's all for the preferences. So let's go ahead and close that up. And let's go over to mesh. Mesh, edit mesh, mesh tools, all of those, and even mesh display, all the mesh menus. We are all going to be using gesture controls for all of that stuff. There might be something in there that we'll have to use a menu on, but very rarely, so we're not going to talk about that. So all the meshes will be concentrating on gesture controls. Curves, we'll be using curves occasionally. We may not use them at all. We may use them depending on your guys' larger projects. I do find curves useful, especially when I'm trying to make sure the silhouette of an object looks nice and smooth. I'll draw out a curve and I'll use it as a guide for that shape. Surfaces, I'm only using surfaces. These are NURBS here, guys. I only will use NURBS as a helper to my polygon modeling. Sometimes that can be helpful, but to be honest with you guys, really nobody uses NURBS in the industry. Very seldom and very rare places will you use NURBS. Places that use NURBS are more like industrial type jobs. They'll use specific programs like Rhino, Softimage, very specific programs, usually like AutoCAD, these type of programs where very specific workflow that is needed for that type of work. So in television, movies, games, NURBS are very rarely, if ever, used. As I said, I use them more as in like helpers to my polygon modeling. We might use them. Once again, it depends upon your guys' personal projects and if I feel like it would be helpful to us. Deformers, we are going to be using deformers in this class. I would recommend that you guys create a button for lattice. So once again, deform lattice, hotkey for creating a button. What is that, Nicholas? How do we create a button?
Sorry, what was the question?
What's the hotkey for creating a button?
Oh yeah, Control Shift left click.
Yep, Control Shift left click, exactly. So see, I like to throw out those pop quiz questions to you guys. Make sure you guys are on your toes, make sure you guys are listening, and once again, making sure that information is absorbing into your guys' brains. So let's go ahead and now move on to our next task of our shelf. We can modify our shelf. Like my poly count, I always like having my poly count all the way over to the left. I just feel like it's a really good location, and it's usually something that I'll turn on and off. So to move a button, you're just going to middle mouse drag over. So I just moved my poly count over to the far left. Another modification I like to do, I have a delete history. I also have a freeze transformation. I always like to take my freeze transformation and move that to the left of my delete history. And this is usually the one to punch. Usually I will want to freeze my transformation and immediately then hit delete history. So those two will usually be back to back. Because if we freeze our transformation if we delete our history and then freeze our transformation, in fact, let's look at it instead of talk about it. So if I delete my history, there's nothing in my history right now under my shapes, and then I freeze transformation, everything is frozen now, everything is fine. I like to just hit those back to back. Everything's keeping it smooth. Everything that we do inside, I talked about everything we do inside of Maya is going to get recorded. So if we start moving this stuff around.
Excuse me, James.
Yes, sir.
Which shortcut did you create for the deform? Did you create any?
I didn't create it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're right. You caught me. So there we go. Shift, Control, left mouse button created the deform. While we're there too, nonlinear, I like a bin deformer. Bin deformers are very, very useful. I'll create a button for that one also. Everything else, we'll use it when we need it. UVs also too. I'll be using hotkeys for that. So that's it for the menus. Okay, so as I was modifying all of this, if we go back to our object, you can see we have a poly extrude phase 2, poly tweaks, poly extrude. So it's kept all this information. It's kept the scale information. If we rotate this around, move it in 3D space, now we've got information in our translate, rotate, and our scale. We've got history on it. So like I said, I'll hit freeze transformation, delete history. Everything is nice and clean. The only time that I'll do this, though, is I'm very aware of when I'm doing it and what I'm doing it on. Sometimes I won't want to freeze the transformation. Sometimes I'll keep that transformation on there, especially if I'm not really confident in that specific piece of geometry. So that is really dependent, individual geometry dependent. I'm going to go ahead and delete that. And now something we're going to move on to. So that was creating a shelf, that was moving things around. If we do have a shelf button that we don't want anymore, let's say we don't want the bevel button on our shelf, you can right click and just simply click on delete. And there you go. One thing is, it's good as you guys continue to work with Maya, you'll be like, oh, you know what? That would be really cool if I had a button for this and a button. Next thing you know, you're going to have 20 buttons across your shelf, which is fine if that's the way you want to work. But I would recommend as you continue to work in Maya, as you continue to use gesture controls and the hotbox, what you'll find is there's probably going to be some buttons on your shelf that you never use anymore. So it's just good to have good housekeeping on your shelf. If you're not really using it very often, and there's no real use for it being there, just delete it. I know on my laptop I have a lot more buttons on my shelf, and a lot of those buttons are specific scripts. They do a very specific job, and I keep them on my shelf just as reminders that I do have those scripts available to me. We'll be talking about helpful scripts later on the larger projects. So that's the shelf. So first homework assignment, I want you guys to create some buttons for your shelf. And then I want you just to take a little screenshot of your shelf. You guys can take a screenshot of the new buttons, or some people will take a screenshot of their entire Maya interface. Let's talk about screenshots for a moment. I'm definitely not trying to sell you guys on a product, but I use a screenshot capturing software that's called Snagit. Wherever that is at. Where is my Snagit? Snagit. So Snagit here works really, really good. So you can come in here, capture. You can come up here. You can marquee select a specific area. If you're happy with that, great. You can also capture video at a certain resolution, though, not super, super high. And then you open up your, it automatically opens up your editor. You can modify it here, crop it, fill it. You can do all kinds of fun things here. So yeah, this is my preferred screen snippet tool or kind of copier. Also, too, you can go down to, if you guys are using Windows, you can go down to your little search here and you can type, not Snagit, what's it called? Snipping tool. There it is. Snipping tool. Every Windows computer has this. Snipping tool opens up and it looks like this. I use this at DreamWorks because they don't have any screen capturing software. So snipping tool, and then I click on new, and then I just select what I want. I capture my little area here. It opens up their editing software, which is very, very limited. And then you just go in here and click File, Save As, and then that's it. I never have gone over that with any other classes. So nice little new tidbit of information there for you guys. I usually just let you guys do whatever you want to do. One reason why I showed you guys is that I am just asking for just the toolbox itself instead of getting this huge old window with a tiny little shelf. But whatever works for you, go for it, guys. And the snipping tool is free, so why not use it, right? So that's the shelf. Next thing I'm going to talk about is I'm going to talk about what is different in my viewports than what you may have by default. What you first will be able to see is my background color. My background color might be different than yours. If you do hit Alt-B, you can change that background inside of Maya. There's actually should be a couple different ones. I think I changed mine already. There is a gradient background you can make. By default, I think it's like a light blue to a darker blue. So yeah, you can go with black, dark gray, light gray, and then there's the gradient. You guys can choose to make those any color you like. I would recommend staying more with the darker color just because it's easier on your eyes. You guys are going to be staring at these screens for a very, very long time. So we want to try to take care of our eyeballs. So don't go with, like a blinding white or a fluorescent green. Not good choices. The next thing you'll notice in my viewport is my ground plane. You'll notice that my grid is color-coded. I have black, dark gray, and red. So let's talk about how we can fix this. And first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to talk about why I decided to change this. And that reason is because it helps me with quickly judging the size of something. Another thing in this class we're going to be doing is we're going to be modeling to real world scale. So what that means is if we're modeling a gun, it's going to be inside of Maya, it's going to be the same size it would be in the real world. So if we're modeling a gun that is this big, size of my remote control, if the gun is this big, let's say this is 11 inches, it should be 11 inches inside of Maya. Most studios that you work at are going to want you to model to real world scale. Some studios you work in will have very specific rules to their scale. Some places like Disney, they'll work in centimeters, but they actually consider it to be 1 centimeter equals an inch, which is kind of a weird one. So it's important to know how you're working in the world of Maya. Can anybody give me a reason why it would be good if all 5 of us are working on a project, why we would all want to be working on the same scale?
So if we share our objects, it doesn't seem way blown out, like everything's to scale. Or if say you're building the wheels to a car and I'm building the main car, we probably want your wheels the same scale as my car.
Yeah, for sure. That's the reason right there. We all need to be working inside the same world. If it's my job to start populating an environment And you know, Nicholas is doing vehicles, Alex is doing characters, Charles is doing vegetation, and Paul is doing, you know, buildings. And it's my job to start putting all this into one scene. And all of a sudden, I start pulling things in. I'm like, whoa, whoa, whoa. Or maybe I don't even question it. I just automatically think we're all working in the same world. And next thing you know, my supervisor is coming in to look at my work. And he's like, what are those? I'm like, oh, those are the bushes. He's like, that's not a bush. That's supposed to be a tree. Well, then who looks bad? Then it makes me look bad as an artist, right? And that's not good. I want to try to do my job to the best of my ability. And guess then what's going to happen? Then I'm going to be hating whoever's doing vegetation. Who is doing vegetation on this project, guys? Anybody remember who I called out?
Yeah.
No? Okay, Alex. We'll say Alex was doing vegetation. Then the next thing you know, then I don't like Alex. Like, Alex! He was supposed to give me that real world skill and it made me look bad. Well, guess what? Then I'm not going to be really happy with Alex. And then what's going to happen? I'm going to go over to my next job at another studio and they're going to be like, hey, do you know anybody that does vegetation? Well, guess who I'm not going to think about or I'm not going to recommend? I'm not going to recommend Alex. No, I don't know anybody who would be good for the team. What you want is you want to be working, you want to be a good worker. You want to be someone who people like to work with. You're doing things the right way. So what the better opportunity is, hey, do you know anybody that can help us out on this project? Yeah, you know, Alex did all the vegetation for this one project I was on. You know, super cool guy. Gave me everything I wanted. You know, it was really easy to work with. Well, guess what? Alex has a personal recommendation. Instead of Alex having to, you know, put his application in for this place, you know Alex is looking for a job. I put in a good word for him. Alex is all of a sudden pushed to like the front of the line because he's got a personal recommendation. And next thing you know, Alex is coming in for a job interview. Hi, Alex. Thanks for coming in. James said you do great work. That's it. Then everything that's left up to Alex after that is just trying to, you know, be a cool guy during the job interview and showing his good work. And next thing you know, Alex has a job doing vegetation on the next project. And it works that way in the real world, guys. What is unfortunate, guys, is there are a lot of really, really great artists out there in the world. And there's a lot of great artists who are not working. That's where it goes back to me talking about how important it is for networking, being in contact with fellow artists, reaching out to fellow artists, staying in contact with instructors. You know, when you guys get to the point where you're ready to start looking for a job, reach out. Hey, James, it's me, Charles, from your Hard Surface 1 class. I feel like my portfolio is ready for me to start applying for places. Can you take a look at my work, or do you know of any places that you think might have any openings for a new modeler trying to get their foot in the door? I want to be able to recommend you guys. So that's why we need to make sure that we're even in school right now, even in classes, we need to make sure that we're conducting ourselves as professional as we can. Doing what I ask you guys to do. You know, if I ask you to build to real world scale, give me real world scale. If I ask you guys to, when you build your objects, make sure they're resting on the ground plane. The bottom of your object should be on the ground plane. Then guess what? It should be on the ground plane. Because I have students who will say, you know, I'm applying for a job. It's not a modeler's job, but I was wondering if you can write a letter of recommendation for me. And I'd say, well, you know what? You have a lot more work that you need to do. The quality of your work needs to be a lot better. But what I could do is I could just give you a general recommendation. And then I could say, oh, you know, Nicholas Hahn was in my class. He's a great student, always turned his homework in on time. He was very attentive. He was always asking, you know, good questions. He was always, he had good energy. I can say a lot of good things about people without saying, you know, the person was not a good modeler. You know what I mean? So all those things can be good things for you, but you'll always be wanting to help increase the quality of your work. So the ground plane, going back to our ground plane real world scale, is just a quick reference for me knowing how big something should be in my world. So what we're going to do now, before we take break, we're going to look at how we can modify our grid, should you guys want to. Probably a lot of you guys will want to stay with centimeters, and that's totally fine. So if there's some certain amount of centimeters that you can use as a reference, like 100 centimeters or 10 centimeters, whatever, you guys can make those modifications. So to do that, you're going to go to Display, Grid, Options box. Once again, Display, Grid, Options box. There's a little box there that whenever you see a box next to a command like inside a mesh display, average, you see a little box. Conform, there is no box. Reverse, there's a box. If you see the box, that means there's more things that you can do with that tool. So under the grid options box, what I have set up right here is I have grid length is set to 12. This number can change a lot. And grid lines are set to, grid lines are every 5. I'm going to set that to 12. Remember, these are default settings that Maya has for me right now. So I'm going to set my grid lines up to 12 units. And my subdivisions, I'm going to set that to 12 also. And then if I hit apply, and then I change my length and width of my ground plane, I'm going to say, let's make that 72. And I hit apply. Now when I look at my ground plane inside of my perspective viewport, what I know is I have 12 dark gray lines, or I have 11 gray lines, and then I have a red line. That red line, that's my 1 foot marker. So I can quickly look at red lines and say, oh, this is 1 foot, 2 foot, 3 foot, 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot. So if I know that's 6 feet, then I know this is actually, this entire grid size, this is 12 feet one direction and 12 feet the other direction. And just the same, when I look at my front view, if I know something is supposed to be 1 foot tall, I can quickly say, oh, well, that's about how big it needs to be right there. And it really helps out a lot in quickly blocking out objects in real world scale. Any questions about that? And then you guys can, if you guys choose to, you can set up your axis color to whatever you like. Maybe you want to go, bright green here, and maybe your grid lines, maybe you want to go crazy and go with the green and purple combo. You guys can make whatever fun colors that you want there. Pick what you want on your colors. It's going to be up to you.
Hey, James, this might be a little out of the scope, but so basically every class or every Maya that you go through, you go through and you set up all these preferences and everything. Is there any way to maybe like export a file that just has all your preferences set? So like if you switch from industry or from like your personal computer to work computer, you can transfer all these workflow tools with you?
It's in your documents. You go to My Documents, you go into your Maya file, and then there's going to be a Preferences folder. You just take that Preferences folder, put it on like your Google Drive or your Thumb Drive or Dropbox, wherever your cloud service is, just drop it on there. So wherever you go, it's always going to be there also. I'd recommend to do that also with your ZBrush UI. But yeah,
awesome.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
I don't do that myself. I always just make a fresh one. Kind of helps me as an instructor. It helps me stay on my toes. Like, oh, okay, I got to make my buttons. This is how you make buttons. And it just keeps me knowing what I'm doing. So when I have to explain it, I don't look like I'm fumbling around. And that's it for ground plane. Okay, guys. So I don't know if you guys heard it, but the alarm did go off 6 minutes ago. So let's go ahead and take our break. We will usually take a 10 to 15 minute break. I'm going to set a 15-minute timer on my phone. We'll take our 15-minute break. When the alarm goes off, I'm going to start talking again about class. And when we do, we're going to jump into our second homework assignment, and we're going to start talking about modeling out a dice. And that is it. So I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. I'm going to put my camera on pause and my microphone on pause. I still will be here. So if you guys have questions or comments, I'll answer. This is I'm going to be eating, and I'm sure you guys don't want to be looking at me chewing and hearing me smacking in your ears. All right, so I'll see you guys in 15 minutes. Any questions before I start snacking? No? All right, guys. I'll see you in 15. Anybody out there? Anybody out there? No?
Here.
So this guy's work's pretty good, right? Looks nice and
Yeah.
clean. And guess what caught my eye? This triangle right here. That's the curse, guys. That's the curse. Once you have to not work with triangles, triangles scream at you. I could hear it screaming while I was eating. I was like, "What is that noise?" And all of a sudden, I found it.
But what's this so bad about modeling with triangles? Like, what
It's not-
happens to
it's
like
not
when you
horrible.
render it or something?
Well, some renderers will have won't accept triangles. Some
Oh,
renderers
okay.
won't. And it's just sometimes it's just the production rule. Sometimes it could not in hard surface, but organic modeling. It could cause some imperfections in the deformation of your object. So let's say if you had like a triangle in your cheek and then the character smiled, it could like pop in rendering.
Oh, okay.
So weird things like that. But in hard surface modeling, it's really not going to do none the different.
Okay.
Especially like this project. That triangle there is not going to do anything but bother me. But yeah, this is pretty clean modeling. I mean, there's a few things that I would like if one of you guys did this. I'd be like, yeah, it looks really, really good. Like, well, I'd make one recommendation. I'd be like, well, I'd like to have a little bit more of an edge loop that's running around this hole here. The distribution of polygons looks pretty good. But to get rid of that triangle right there, all you'd have to do, let's see if we can zoom in. This guy's probably got super high res. Nope, not that high res. We'll zoom in here. But this one triangle right here, you could totally get rid of that triangle if you would just delete that edge that's running down there. And then it'd all be quads. Or maybe that goes up and this is still a quad, but it's just super, super tight right in that corner to keep that edge looking sharp there. That could be. I know I got blamed one time. A company in China reached out to me. They wanted me to be their modeling lead for their studio. I was like, oh yeah, that'd be pretty awesome. And they said, well, can you take a look at some of our work and kind of give us some feedback? And I said, yeah, sure. And of course, they paid me for it, so I did it. And then they said, well, do you see anything else that could be different? I was like, yeah, this could be different. Okay, well, can you do it for us? Yeah, I'll do it for you. So I remodeled it, some parts for them, retopologized for them, and then the guy got back to me. One of the owners of the company got back to me. He's like, I hate to say this to you, but I showed your work to some of the guys here, and I could tell this guy was really fighting for his words, the right words to say. He's like, I don't know how to say this, but they said that they just really weren't impressed with your work, and they said they can't believe that you've worked in major studios with the quality of work that you gave us. You guys can imagine. I was like, oh, what? And after he said that, I was like in shock, and I was sitting at my desk, here at home. I was like, oh, and I instantly started fishing for the file I sent them. I'm like, what in the world did I do wrong? I mean, what was the unforgivable sin that I did? So I'm like digging through my file and I'm pulling it up, and I said, wow, I have never had that type of feedback before. I said, well, what did I do? And they said, well, you had triangles in your work, and they said that they really couldn't believe that you'd have triangles. I was like, really? I was like, and then I had them because I'm a no triangles guy, Like, oh, really? I said, did they show you where the triangles were? Yeah, they showed me where the triangles were, and I'm talking to this guy on Skype, so we're talking to each other. He's like, yeah, they showed me. I was like, oh. I said, well, hey, you know what? Do you have a second? I can do a screen share. I would love for you to point out to me where those triangles are. And he's like, yeah, that's okay. I said, because, and I wasn't doing it like, I wasn't trying to be like a aggressive or mean or nasty about it. I said, because I always like to try to do my best work, and I always try to keep myself to the highest standards. And I said, it would really, it'd be good for me to know where these errors are so I can look out for that in the future. And he's like, yeah, and I pull it up and I show him the work. And he's like, and he leads me to it. He's like, it was a character, and the character had hair, like, at the point of the hair, it comes down here to like a V.
Oh, yeah.
And he's like, yeah, right there. There's a triangle right there. And I said, oh, really? And I zoom in, zoom in, zoom in, zoom in. I'm like, does that look like a triangle to you? He's like, oh, that's not a triangle. I'm like, no. So I zoomed out. I said, well, where's the other triangles at? And he's like, in this other part. And same thing. I zoom in, and it wasn't a triangle. And I said, where were the other triangles? He's like, James, I am so sorry. He's like, I'm not gonna, or we don't have to go through this. I'm not gonna put you through this. He's like, I think I know what's going on here. And I said, well, I would like to know what's going on here, because if I'm gonna be, considering coming over there to work with you guys, I need to know what's going on. He's like, well, let me get back to you. And so he ended up getting back to me. What ended up happening is two of these guys who were bashing my work were trying to jockey for that position. They wanted to be the lead modelers for the studio.
Oh.
And he ends up telling me that, and I was like, well, who are these guys? He's like, well, the one guy, he's an effects guy, and the other guy is a guy from Disney. And I was like, oh, really? I was like, well, what Disney movies did he work on? He's like, oh, he worked way back in the 2D days. I was like, oh, and I then had to take the knife and push it in a little further. I was like, oh, so neither one of these guys are modelers? And he's like, well, no, neither one of them are modelers. And I said, well, you know what? I said, I'm respectfully going to have to step out of this opportunity. I'm like, I don't feel like it would be the best environment for me to be working in, a place that I'm not even working there, and I've got two people that are trying to take my job and hyper critiquing my work that aren't even qualified to do so. I'm like, I don't think that's a work environment I want to be a part of. And he's like, oh, is there anything I can do? What, can we talk about this? And I was like, no, I'm sorry. I just can't do this. And yeah, it was really dirty. I was like, man, these guys getting attacked from China. That's tough. But yeah, you gotta, sometimes you need to justify yourself, and that's where it's good to have confidence in your work. Like, well, 48 seconds. You got to be confident in your work. So when people do challenge you, well, why did you make this decision? And you say, oh, I did it for this and this and this. Well, why is, whatever. Why is this panel line this big? Shouldn't it be tighter in that area? That's when you got to pull it. Well, these are the references that I was given, or these are the additional reference images that I found to clarify that area. I didn't get any more information for that. So this is why I made that decision, because of this, and this. And then people will be like, oh, okay. And then if they don't like it, then they can change it. It just wasn't you just trying to be all the crazy guy, coming up with wild changes on your own. And I've been in those situations plenty of times, at Disney, doing something at Disney, and they're like, oh, well, why'd you decide to do that different? I was like, well, it was unclear in the concept, and I found some reference images online, and these are the pictures that I used. Oh, yeah, that makes a lot more sense. Yeah, well, let's go ahead and keep what you did, and we'll push it forward. I'm like, okay, and I've had it opposite. And I'm like, well, you know what? Let's stay with the concept, even though it's not functionally correct. Okay, no problem. And I'll always have that other one saved, or I'll have it in the layers palette that I'll pull up. Okay, no problem. Here's the original right here, and delete mine, and that's it. But we do got to be careful with, especially as modelers, we do have to be careful with going off on our own tangents. Like, this doesn't look cool, I'm going to make it look cool. Real world story of that, I was working, I was at a big studio, and there was a modeler there who made a decision without asking anybody. their supervisor, the lead supervisor, nobody. And they were in a very large meeting with, I heard it was like 15 to 20 people in the room. And one of the big guys is like, "What's that?" And they zoom in. Who authorized this? Who okayed this? This wasn't in a part of the story. And then it just starts going down. Well, I didn't, and all of a sudden it gets down to the modeler who made the decision that they thought it would be cool if they changed something, and that wasn't good for that modeler. Especially, when you're talking about Disney, you're everything in those big studios, everything is like it's just murdered. It's beaten over. It's like changed 5 million times until they get it exactly the way they want it. So you can imagine they're not giving you too much flexibility in you trying to make your wise guy decisions. Usually it's just like, this is the way it's supposed to be. You're just a robot. They give you a concept. Model this, model this, model this. And they give you a lot of great reference images. Sometimes not 100% clear, but that's why I said you need to make sure you have that confidence to back up those decisions. All right, so let's do a quick check, make sure everybody is back. We got Alex is back. Charles, are you back? Yes. Okay. Nicholas?
Here.
Okay. And Paul?
Yeah, I'm here.
Awesome. Where's everybody from? Alex, you're in California here, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Nicholas, where are you at?
I'm studying at USC, but I'm from Argentina.
From where?
Argentina.
Argentino?
Yeah.
Oh. And you said you're at UCLA?
USC.
Oh, USC. Awesome. My wife went to USC. You're Trojans, man. Cool, man. And Charles, where are you at? Georgia. Wow. But also from the Bronx, New York. Well, that's a big difference there, man. That's like, that's crazy different. Which part of Georgia? Oh, your family moves a lot? Yeah, I hear you. My dad was in the military. We moved like every 3 to 4 years. But man, what a difference. Bronx to Georgia? Sheesh. How you like in Georgia? I imagine it's pretty decent. All over the place. You guys running from the law? I'm just joking. Yeah, there's no Nomen in Georgia. Yeah, too bad, right? And then finally, Paul, where are you at?
Right now I'm in California. I bounced around though, but I live in Portland, Oregon.
Okay, awesome.
Mostly, yeah.
Well, cool. One reason why I ask you guys is just to kind of find out where you guys are at in the world. So it looks like we got everyone's in the U.S. Another reason why I ask is to throw out an invite to you guys. So if you guys are in California, or if you plan a trip out to California, and you want to come by DreamWorks, we could catch some lunch at the cafeteria, and I could give you a tour of DreamWorks. You guys could check that out. It's a pretty cool place to go. I like inviting students and people who have never been to studios like that. I think it's a pretty fun thing. I've been in the industry for 10 years. I still try to keep excited about working in places. Sometimes, a job just turns into a job no matter what studio you're at. But I always try to, slap myself around and be like, come on, man, you're working at DreamWorks. Or, you're working at this place. And I like to try to share that magic with people. So seriously, guys, if you are interested in coming up, yeah, just reach out to me. If you could just give me at least a 24-hour notice. Say, hey, whatever, it's Alex and Nicholas. We were wondering if we could come up for lunch. And it would be awesome if, maybe you guys could find a time that you guys could come and meet up together, because then you guys are going to have contact with each other. I can have up to 4 visitors at a time. So if three of you guys, not unless Charles wants, or not Charles. Was it Charles? Charles was the, yeah, Charles. Unless Charles wants to make a trip out, all 4 of you guys can come over for a tour at the same time. But in all seriousness, guys, that invitation is there for you. I have gave a tour on, I think it was on Wednesday, to some of my past students, and then Monday I have another tour I'm giving, and then Wednesday is another tour. So yeah, it's fun. Because like I said, yeah, of course. It's fun to see the inside of studios. You obviously aren't going to be able to see a lot, but I can walk you around the exterior of the studio. I can take you into my work area and show you that portion of DreamWorks. But yeah, it's fun stuff. Okay, guys, let's jump back into Maya. So our second homework assignment is a dice. And when I say a dice, I'm talking about the kind you like shaking your hand, you throw it on the table, and it has dots on each side. It's a fairly easy homework assignment, but there are going to be some key things that we're going to go over with this homework assignment. Some key tools that we're already going to be learning, or skills that we're going to be learning, that we're going to be applying throughout the rest of this course. So let's go ahead and jump into it. I've got my four viewports open. I'm going to create a cube. I'm going to hold down Shift right mouse button. When I hold down Shift right mouse button, this is going to open up my Create Polygon tools. So once again, Shift right mouse button. One thing I will point out is down at the very, very bottom here, interactive creation is turned off. That is off by default. So if I do go in here and I want to create a polycube, Shift right mouse button, drag your right mouse button, and I'm dragging down to cube, and I let go, it is going to create a cube. If I hit F to frame in my perspective viewport, it's going to frame that object. And you can see that this cube has been created, and you can see that the center of this cube is at the origin of our world. It's at the center of our world. Now, sometimes that will be okay. I always build everything resting on the ground plane. Most studios, you're going to have the object resting on the ground plane. So I don't like interactive creation on for that reason. Another reason why I don't like interactive creation on is, let's say if I'm modeling a large object and it's like way out here. Like I need a cube, but I need it out here. Well, what I'm having to do at that time is now I'm going to have to pull this cube, I'm going to have to move it or snap it up to where I'm working, and then I'm going to have to scale it and work from there. So I don't like to have that interactive creation turned off. So Shift right mouse button, I'm going to turn on interactive creation. Now you can see that that is on. And I'm going to go to cube now. And now when I do that, I'm getting a little heads up display. It's telling me drag on the grid to create the cube. I'm going to come over to my top viewport, and I'm going to hold down Shift and X. Once again, Shift and X. And then I'm going to drag out from the middle of my world in my top view. And you can see now I have a cube in my world, and it's resting on the ground plane. So that's...
How did you create the interaction creation again? Turn
Sure.
it on.
Shift right mouse button,
Mhm.
interactive creation. And I have it checked on.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Or if you wanted to, I'm not going to do this very often, guys. Or if you wanted to, you could go to Mesh. Go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and here it is right here, Interactive Creation. Now you see how much more time that took? I had to move my mouse over to the far left of my screen, go to Create, Polygon Primitives, and then move down to Interactive Creation. When just using the gesture controls, Shift right mouse button and went straight down to Interactive Creation. These gesture control hotbox commands, super, super important, guys, and I do promise if you use it, you're probably not going to like it. I'm going to be honest with you. You're probably not going to like it at the beginning. You're probably going to hate it. You're going to be like, which button was that? I forgot how to do it. That's why I'm going to keep repeating this to you, but I promise you, you will get faster. I resisted for a long time until finally I was working at Nickelodeon, and I had one of my coworkers who said, why aren't you using the gesture controls? And I said, because I hate them. He said, well, you know what? I guarantee you're going to get faster. He's like, just try it for 2 weeks and give it a try. And I tried it for the first week, and I still hated it, but I started to see how beneficial it was. And then the second week, I was like, yeah, I think I can get to use this. And then after that, I never went back to punching buttons up in menus all the time or having 50 buttons on my shelf. So it is really, really helpful, and it's just practice. So once again, that shift right mouse button, go to cube. I hover my mouse in my top viewport, or you can, inside of your perspective viewport, hover your mouse over the origin, hold down Shift and X, and left click and drag, and then you can create whatever size cube you want. Now for this first homework assignment, actually for the first couple of homework assignments, we're not going to worry about the scale of our object. It can be whatever scale you want. I'm not worried about real world scale right now. We're really just looking for techniques. When we get to week 3, we will start talking about real world scale, or having our work done in real world scale. So we've got our cube here. I guess it's good to talk about what a dice is, right? So one thing I do whenever I have to whenever I have to model something, I always will analyze it. I'll look at the object, I'll look at the concept, and I will instantly start analyzing it. What does that look like? And with more complex objects, you have to start thinking about in multiple different ways. Like, well, this part looks like a cylinder, and this part looks like a sphere, and that looks like a cube. Well, you can start breaking down complex shapes down to their simplest shapes. It's going to make your life so much easier. That's what I like to refer to as seeing the matrix. We've all seen the Matrix, right, guys? So there's that time when Tank is sitting there at the controls, and there's he's got 4 monitors across the screen, and it's got all the green font is all raining down on the monitors, and this dude's just sitting there at the controls, and he's looking at the Matrix, and he can see everything that's going on in the Matrix like that. That's kind of what I want you guys to do. I will always tell the story about when I first saw the Matrix. I was so deep into trying to teach myself. This is back when I even was teaching myself modeling. So bad I wanted to be a good modeler. I wanted to model everything I could touch. I'd pick up my remote control and be like, man, how can I model this? And I would start analyzing it and looking at it and just totally saturating myself with modeling. And then one day I was driving my car and I stopped at a red light and I looked over to the right and there was a post office box there. And it just wasn't like a square post office box. It's kind of the round top on it, and it comes down like a square, and it has the 4 little legs on it. All of a sudden, I was standing there, and I was thinking, man, how could I model that thing? And all of a sudden, boom! I saw the Matrix. And I was like, oh, I know what I could do. I could start with a cylinder, and then I grab the bottom half of that cylinder, and I can extrude it down, and then flatten it, and then I could do this and this and this, and then all of a sudden, I started to imagine what the wire frame should look like. And it was a really, really awesome, magical time. So if that hasn't happened to you guys, I hope that happens to you during this class, because it's something I want to try to do is help train your artistic eye. I want you guys to have that confidence level. And believe me, it took me a long time where I started to get really good confidence to the point where I could look at anything and start to imagine what the wireframe should look like. But that's how we want to get. No matter how complex it is, we should be able to break it down to its simplest forms and what the wireframe should look like. Now, it's not 100% of what the wireframe should look like, but about what the wireframe should look like. Because if you can get that, then you can start to understand the process of building that object. Because the wireframe, it's just a blueprint of how this object has been created. So start thinking about those things as you're driving around or as you're sitting wherever. And if you're bored, especially if you're bored, you don't have anything to do, you're trying to occupy your mind, just look around, no matter where you're at. Look around at something like, oh, I wonder how I can model that. And then start looking at it. Okay, well, it looks like a cylinder, it looks like a square, it looks like a sphere. Probably would take that sphere, I probably would grab that part there, and I probably would pull it out and extrude or whatever that process might be. Because it's great. It's a great chess game that we play with ourselves, because I like to think of as modeling as like playing chess. Because when we're modeling something, we analyze what we're going to model, and then we have to think about how we're going to model it, and then we execute it, right? And that's how chess is, right? I'm not a chess player at video games, let's say, right? We're all playing a video game. We all know what the objective of that video game is. and we have to think about it before we actually do it. I mean, there's some people like Leroy Jenkins. Do we all know who Leroy Jenkins is? Yeah, there's Leroy Jenkins who's just he just runs in there. Craziest guy in the whole video game world, right? Leroy Jenkins. He runs in there and he's not thinking about anything. He has no game plan. He's just nuts. No brains. And everybody's mad at Leroy Jenkins. They're like, Leroy, what are you doing? It's one of the best videos ever. But we don't want to be Leroy Jenkins. We want to think smart, and we want to think ahead of what we're trying to do. We want to think about not one step ahead, not 2 steps ahead. We want to think like 4, 5, 6 steps ahead, as far as that we can comfortably and confidently see into the future of that model. We want to try to be able to see. So as we look at a dice, let's pull up a real world reference of a dice. I would recommend all you guys use some type of a dice as a reference. So let's type up dice, and then let's go to images, and let's say this first one as an example. So as I'm analyzing this dice, I first like, what does this look like? Oh, it looks like a cube. So it looks like a cube. The next thing I start analyzing, I start looking at how soft this corner is. That's really, really important. That's starting to tell the story of this object. If an object has a sharp corner, then it's probably, it's definitely hard. It might be metal. It might be really like a fresh, clean cut, maybe of anything, plastic or wood. But when we have softer corners, then there's lots of story that starts to get involved in there. The object could be old. It could be used. So this is when I start talking about every model tells a story. It's telling a story of what that object is made out of and how it's used and the world that it's a part of. So it's really, really important as modelers is we start thinking about that, because I've seen some students work where they seem so like they're so caught up in the techniques that their objects look super CG. All the edges are exactly the same, same sharpness. It feels really lifeless. It feels real sterile. I think that's a good word for it. It just feels real CG and sterile. We need to think about that. We need to think about not all the parts in an entire object are all going to have the exact same size of bevel, we'll say. So it's important that we analyze our work. So if this is my reference image, then I'm looking at the roundness of that. I also start to look at the holes. I'm looking at how sharp it goes from the white part to the black part. That's a pretty sharp edge on there. I'm thinking about that. I'm also looking at how deep that hole is. I'm also looking at the highlight. I'm looking at the highlight of the hole. It looks like this isn't a perfect half a sphere. It looks like it goes almost to like a point, like a drill went down, like, and it had a sharp point on the end. And that seems to back up with this view here. It feels like it was just drilled in real quick. So I always will analyze my work before I even start. And then once I jump into Maya, I've got this cube in here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to mimic the edge quality, how soft that edge was. Now what I'm going to do for that, I can do this a couple different ways, but I'm going to just show you guys what I feel is the fastest way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go right mouse button, and I'm going to go up to edge. So once again, right mouse button, edge, and I'm going to marquee select, just left click and drag everything. So I've got all the edges selected. I'm going to hold down shift, right mouse button, once again, shift, right mouse button, and I'm going to go to bevel. Now I've beveled my edges, and the first thing we should see is that the bevels are way, way too big. So let's refresh our mind. Let's jump back to our concept, our reference, and it's not that soft. So we have a little window here, and we can start adjusting the fraction. So if we left click and drag on this fraction, you can see it's changing the width of that edge. Something else, as you guys do this, you'll notice as you're left click and dragging, that's a little jumpy. It's not a smooth operation here. So a nice tip, if you hold down Control and then you left click, you're going to get a very, very smooth controlled modification to this. So once again, holding down Control, left clicking and dragging on the word fraction, you'll get a lot more control out of that. So I'm going to take this down to maybe about here. And then I start analyzing it. I'm like, ooh, there's a triangle there. Can't have triangles. He's going to go Gordon Ramsay on me. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take my segments, and I'm going to take my segments up to 2. So what I did is I just added an extra edge loop in there. So not only did it get rid of the triangle, but it also helped with the roundness of my bevel. So that's looking pretty good. Something else that is good to know is down here is the chamfer. So if we zoom in here, holding down Alt, and then right-clicking and dragging, we're going to zoom in here. If we left-click and drag on the word chamfer, turning this on and off, we should see what's happening here. So it's sharpening the edge or it's rounding the edge. So there's going to be times and there's going to be objects that you'll want the chamfer turned on, and sometimes when you'll want the chamfer turned off. For this, we want a softer edge, so I'm going to go with the chamfer turned on. Now, we can go ahead and go to Object Mode, select our object, and hit 3. 3 is our smooth preview. And now what I'm doing is I'm starting to analyze my surface quality. You're going to hear me say this a lot over the next 10 weeks. Surface quality. Surface quality is just that. How good does this surface look? Does it look how it should? Does it have bumps? Does it have dents? How soft is the corner? That's surface quality. Now to analyze our surface quality to the best that we can, this shader, this Lambert shader, looks really flat. We see there's a slight lighter edge on the edges there, but it's not the best for analyzing surface quality. So we're going to grab our object, and I'm going to right-click and go down to Assign New Material. Once again, right-click, Assign New Material. Once I do that, I'm going to get this Assign New Material cube to my cube, and the shader that I want is a blend shader. So now I have a blend shader over here. We can deselect, and now we can rotate around, and now we can see on that edge there's almost a white highlight along that edge. So what I like to do is I like to rotate around. I like to start to look at that white as that white moves around my object. I'm looking for any imperfections. Now with this cube, we're not going to see any. This is very simple. But when I get into more complex objects, you guys will see it because I'm going to do this on your work. I'm literally going to hold down Alt and left click and drag, and I'm going around in a circle. Circle, circle. And I'm slowly rotating this object around. I do this with my work when I'm working. Circle, 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 circle. And each time I'm doing that, I'm looking at that highlight. What is that highlight doing as I'm moving across, as it's moving across my surface? Is it looking good? Is it looking clean? Is it moving really strangely? And I'll do that to check out how good things are looking. So everything is looking fine. I feel like the edge quality is good. Looks like my concept. So now we'll move on to the next stage. So the next stage is I now need to start dividing up this face, because right now I have one face here. So looking at my dice, I know I'm going to need at least, not at least, I will need 6 holes here, right? 6 faces on this. So I need to have 6 faces through here. So let's jump back here. And now I'm going to go to Object Mode, Shift right mouse button. Once again, Shift right mouse button. I'm going to go to Insert Edge Loop, Options box. We saw the little box there. That means there's more. I'm going to go there. That's going to open up my options box. I'm going to pull that up. And now what I want to do is I want to change my settings. I want to change this to multiple edges. The multiple edges, I want 2 because I want to put 2 edge loops in here. So now I'm going to click here, and I'm going to click here and here. So now I rotate around, make sure all that looks good. And
so Could you do that again?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did something that I should have told you guys about. So let's go back. Shift right mouse button, edge loop, insert edge loop option box. Change my settings to multiple edge loops. Change that to 2. And then I left click on an edge. And then you can click on another edge and then another edge. And then I rotate around. Everybody good?
Yes.
Okay. So now that's all good. So I'm going to hit Q. Q is going to drop that tool. And now what I need to do is I need to start selecting my faces. So right click, face. Now on a real dice, guys, there's a certain pattern that's on here, right? So here we see 3, 2, 6. And then if we look at this dice, we see that 5, 4, and the 6. I don't really care, guys. You guys can put these numbers anywhere you want. We just want to have 1 through 6 on our dice. So I'm going to with faces, 1, I'm going to go 2, I'm going to go 3, I'm going to go 4, and I'm doing this by hitting Shift, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, rotate around. Now I need 6 here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I have all of that set up. So I've got all my spots selected. I'm going to focus on 6. What's important to note, guys, on this operation is Maya can look at this selection as one solid selection, or it could look at it as 3 individual selections. So let's go ahead and look at this. So I'm going to go ahead and hit Shift, right mouse button, and I'm going to go down to Extrude Faces. When I click on Extrude Faces, the area I want you to focus on is in this little floating window here. Down at the very bottom, it says Keep Faces Together. If I keep the faces together, on the 6 side, it's going to look at these 3 faces as one big face and these 3 as one big face. That's not what we want. We want it to see it as 6 individual faces. So I'm going to turn that off. And now I want to go ahead and I'm going to offset my square. So what I'm doing is my mouse is over the offset. I click on offset, or you can hold down Control and left click on your offset, and you can make these squares smaller. So I'm going to make these smaller, something about here. And notice that it's doing it to all of them, all at the same time. Now the benefits of that, everything is going to be a set, right? They're all going to be the exact same size, which is great, uniform. This is man-made, so everything is manufactured. Everything was very purposeful, so we're going to do everything the same time. Now that I have the size of the hole, now I need to start thinking about that next stage. That next stage is how sharp that transition was from the white part to the black part. And we already established that that was a pretty hard transition, a pretty hard edge between that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the G key. G is going to repeat my last command. Now my last command was extrude. So I hit G. There you go. So now we've just extruded again. And now I'm going to offset a little bit more. I'm going to pull that in a little bit, just a little bit, because I want that edge to be sharp. And now I'm going to hit G one more time. So now I hit G again. Now I'm going to push this in with the arrow. And I also want to offset it just a little bit. So the closer these edges are to each other, the sharper they're going to be. I'm going to go with right about there. Then I'm going to hit G again.
Sorry, how did you push it, all of them in?
With this arrow button, right, the arrow on my manipulator.
Because when I push it, all of them go like left, or if I push the top, all of them go. Wait. I'll share the screen.
Okay. I think what you did is you
Did I do it?
accidentally jumped out of extrude and you just went to move.
Maybe I'll extrude one more time.
Yeah. Just do the extrude and then you'll see your manipulator. It might not be exactly where mine is. You may have to rotate
Okay,
it
yeah.
around.
Yeah, it works. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I'm gonna push this in a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and offset this. It's because with my reference, it had a bit of a sharper little divot there. Actually, I'm going to go a little more complex with mine. I'm going to pull mine out a little bit, offset it a little bit. I'm going to hit G. I'm going to push it in, offset. Go. I think something like that will work. And then on my concept, or on my reference, it does seem like it gets a little bit, it has a kind of a distinct little hole there, or a little point. So for that, I'm going to hit G one more time, and I'm just going to offset that a little bit. Something like that. Now, please guys, this is going to be a time saver here. Now, with these faces still selected, I'm going to expand my selection. To expand your selection, the hotkey is going to be Shift and the period key, or the Shift and greater than sign on your keyboard. So I'm holding down Shift, and I hit expand, 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 expand. I take that all the way out to
Shift and what again? Sorry.
the period key.
Okay.
See the greater than sign? Kind of looks like
Yes.
this. Actually, is that right for you guys?
Shift and...
I can't even tell on the camera.
Okay, yeah.
Okay.
Got it. Thanks.
So I expanded that out all the way to that edge of where the black and the white meet up. Now with this selection, all this is selected. I'm going to right click, go down to assign new material, and I'm going to assign a blend shader to this. Now this blend shader, I can change the color. I'm going to pull this down all the way down to black. There we go. And then I'm going to go ahead and go into object mode. I'm going to look around. I'm going to make sure everything looks all the same. Nothing crazy. So that's good. Then I'm going to hit smooth preview. Deselect my object. Start rotating around. And it's looking pretty close to my reference. Now some things that might be different on my reference is, like on my reference, the holes are bigger, they're further apart, so there's some minor things like that, but we're not, we didn't get hired by the local casino to make dice for their commercial, so we're going more for just techniques like I was saying, but it's important for us to practice that extrusion. The G key is repeat last command, using the offset, using the bevels, creating our object, creating materials. We can click on our object. We can delete the history. You see everything has been recorded here. So I'm going to delete my history. And when we look over here in the top right under the attribute editor, oh, I'm sorry guys, one other thing that I did different in your Maya, I have my channel box over on the left side. You can tear off your channel box. Usually, by default, it's over on the left side. I just like it over on the, I'm sorry, it's usually on the right side by default. I like it on the left side. Come on. The reason why I like it on the left side is because I can have another window open over here, like the attribute editor, and it's not pushing all my work over to the left side of my screen. So I have a balance of a menu over here and another menu over here, kind of like in ZBrush. You guys are familiar with ZBrush? You can have two docks. So my work always is staying in the center of my screen. So yeah, going over here to the attribute editor, we have blend 1 and we have blend 2 over here. So let's go ahead and change our blend 1. Let's go ahead and turn that to a nice white. Or if you want, you can change that to any color you want. Maybe mine's a crazy green dice. And there we go. And that, guys, is the dice homework assignment. Are there any questions? No? Okay, so since there are no questions, let's do some repeating and let's start talking about what I'm going to be looking for in your guys' work. Are we ready? If you're taking notes, this would be a good time to start writing notes. So, as we look at our object here without our object selected, we rotate around and we kind of see there's like a hard edge on the corners. And inside the black area, there's a really noticeable like break in that edge there. What we're going to do is we're going to soften our edges. So we're going to grab our object, hold down Shift, right mouse button, once again, Shift, right mouse button, and go down to Soften Harden Edge, which is in the bottom right. Soften Harden Edge, and then Soften Edge. So the stroke direction that we're doing is kind of like a down arrow button. You can see there on my screen. So we soften our edges, deselect, and now we look at it, and everything looks pretty good. Now, one thing is to note, guys, as we do look at it, we're getting kind of this weird kind of line shading in here, and we see it's a little hard in here. We can modify our settings. I usually don't like to go into this too deep right now. But you can go to Soften Harden Edge, and you can go to your options box. Right now, by default, it's set to 30 degrees. You can modify that should you want to. So if you drop that down. So what this is doing is it's going to, the object is going to have softened edges if it's greater than, if the angle is greater than 9.5, whatever your settings are. If you increase this, say 90, let's go 90. So it's only going to keep a hard edge if it's 90 degrees. I don't think I have any 90-degree angles in here. So everything should look pretty smooth. You guys don't have to mess with that, though. 30 is fine. We'll take that back to default. Okay, so that all looks good. And now we're going to talk about that list I was going to mention. So the following lists are things that I want you guys to, before you turn in your homework, this is going to be a checklist I want you guys to do every time you turn in homework. Are we ready? Okay,
Yes.
so object is going to be on the ground plane. It's not going to be below the ground plane like this. It's not going to be floating above the ground plane. It's going to be resting on the ground plane. Now, an easy way of doing that is snapping your manipulator to the bottom of your object. Let's pull this up in the air. Let's say we worked with Fred. Fred's not a clean modeler, and we have to fix Fred's work. So first thing we got to do is we got to snap our manipulator down to the bottom of our object. That's going to be D as in dog. We talked about that already. D as in dog, and then we're going to hold down V. D and V. V as in Victor. And then we're going to left click and drag on the Y arrow. And we're going to pull that all the way down. Now what that is doing, because we're holding down V, it is snapping to the vertices. The lowest vertices are the bottom of the object. So we have that set up. And now what we can do is we can hold down X, once again X, and we can drag that down and snap that to the ground plane. So now our object is resting on the ground plane, and Fred is enjoying his vacation in Hawaii as we're doing his work. So we've got that. It's resting on the ground plane. We have shaders assigned to it. We have color assigned to our object. You guys can use whatever colors that you want. So we want to have some color on there. We also have a blend shader on our object. Once again, a blend shader. Alex, why is it important to use a blend shader?
I'm not sure what blend shader it is.
Okay. Why are we using this shader? Okay. Do you know what a shader is, Alex?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Or a material. I'll call it a material or a shader. Why are we using this material on our object?
Oh, you meant blend shader.
Blend, yeah. Blend.
Yeah, I thought blend shader. I guess to see imperfections better.
Yeah,
Because it has.
exactly. Check out our surface quality, right? That's
Right.
why we want to use a blend. So we've got a blend shader on there resting on the ground plane. We soften the edges. We're going to add that to the list. Soften edges. And then something else we want to do. We talked about it before. We're going to go ahead and I'm going to center my pivot. And then I'm going to freeze transformations. And I'm going to delete the history. And then something else we're going to add to our list. We're going to start naming our objects. Now we're not going to do this all the time because we're considering this to be a finished model. You guys will, for several weeks, you guys are going to be turning in things that are not even close to being finished. And I don't want you guys to name stuff. That's a waste of time. The only time you'll name stuff is when it's finished. Since this dice is finished, what we're going to do, over here in your channel box, you can just highlight that T cube, and I'm going to call this dice. Some studios you work in, they'll have different rules. Some of them like a capital letter. Some of them like lowercase letter. Some of them like underscore geo, G-E-O, as in geometry. Some places will want the geo to be capitalized. Some will want it to be lowercase. So naming convention is really, really important, guys. Naming convention is just a standard that naming in a studio. Some places don't care. Name it whatever you want. I always ask, no matter where I'm working, what's your naming convention? How do you guys name things here? Do you guys have an example of your naming convention? And usually they will. Or what you can do is just open up a file that has already been approved and just follow what is in there. So dice underscore geo. We froze the transformations. We deleted the history, resting on ground plane, soften the edges, blend shader. That is it. And then this would be a finished object right here. Any questions about the dice? Or anything else we've talked about today? Nope. Okay. The next thing I want to talk to you guys about is model optimization. And I'm going to duplicate this object. To duplicate an object, the hotkey is Control D. Control D. That's like as in duplicate. So you duplicate that, and then you can move this over. Another nice quick tip for you guys: if you hit Shift D now, it's going to duplicate your object and translate it. So that's a pretty cool trick. Duplicate and translate at the same time. Once again, you got to duplicate, you move, and then with that object still selected, Shift-D, Shift-D, Shift-D as many times as you like. It's going to have equal spacing in between there. That's really a nice, good hard surface trick there. So what we're going to talk about now is optimization of our models. And the main factor of that is what's important to know is how is your model going to be used? What is your model for? And that's another great question when we're modeling something. Is this going to be a background object? Is this going to be an object that a character is going to interact with? Is there going to be an extreme close-up of this object? Because all those questions are going to lead us to the answers that are really important for us. Because if we are working, I'm going to change this up a bit, guys. this a little bit more extreme. If we are on a job and we get a request to build an object, knowing where an object is going to be used at in a scene is extremely important to us because we're going to know how much time we need to spend on that object. If this object is going to be way back here in the background, we may not even have to do any modeling. This thing could just be a square, and they could just paint the details on there. If the object is going to be really, really close to the camera, then we're obviously going to need to have more detail there. So what we're going to do, we're going to say this is our commercial that we're working on. I'm going to take this object, and I'm going to smooth this one time. So shift right mouse button, smooth. And I'm going to analyze this. I still see faceted edges on here. We can see the edges along our circle. So I'm going to hit G, repeat last command, and look at it. Still can see the edges. I'm going to hit G again. Let's try deselecting. Okay, I don't see the edges on there anymore. So it's safe to say that this resolution, this amount of geometry, is going to work fine if it's this close to the camera. So now let's go back to this one. And now I'm going to hit G to smooth. Still can see the edges. One more time. And that looks good there. So back here, let's smooth that. Oh, still need it. Here. Okay, so right about there. Then the rest of these probably could just be textures way back here. So we'll get rid of those guys. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at multiple different models with different amounts of geometry. So this model that is an extreme close-up, we can look up here in our polygon heads-up display. Remember that button that I'd highly recommend that you guys have. We can look up here and we can look up faces, and we can see that this one dice has 41,856 faces. 41,856 faces, almost 42,000 polygons for this object. When we go back to this next one, this has 10,464. And then we'll go back to the next one. That one has the same amount. That one has the same amount. And then our furthest back that we could go, we have that one at 2,616. We could actually just take that back even more. Just doing a little swapping around here so we can literally see the difference. And then finally, the guy that's in the far back, that was what we could consider our low res for that distance. This one has 654. So why I do this example is, once again, it's really important to know how is our object going to be used. Because what we don't want to do is we don't want to have this model here, 418,000 polygons, and turn this in if it's going to be in the background. That's a lot of wasted resources, and people will not be happy with you at all. So it's very important to have just the right amount, and boy, is that a confusing tip, right? You have to have just the right amount of polygons. That's why whenever I model, I always model as low as I possibly can while still trying to retain the silhouette of the object. Because if we look at the silhouette of the object, the outside, do we all understand what silhouette means? Okay?
Yeah.
If we all can look at this, if we all look at the silhouette of this object, let's look at it like this. You guys probably won't be able to see it too well, or maybe it'll be even better for you guys. The silhouette of the object, and this is something I like to call silhouette mode. We hit this 7 key, the 7 key on our keyboard. What that does is it technically it turns on all the lights in your scene. And if you don't have any lights, then it just makes everything black. So I like to call this silhouette mode because then I can start analyzing my shapes. This is really, really helpful. So when we go into silhouette mode, this one here looks exactly the same as this one here. And it's considerably less. 418,000 compared to 654. So if I were modeling this for a job, for a studio, or personal project, I would model, this would be my finished model that I would turn into a studio, right here. That guy right there is what I would turn in. And then during the review process with my supervisor or whoever, and they would look at my work and they'd say, if you want to turn your default lights back on at 6, hit the 6 key. And then in the final inspection of your object, if they look at this and they go, oh, you know what, that dice is too low. Do you think you could smooth that? Like, yeah, sure, no problem. You smooth it one time. How's that? Yeah, that's good. Let's go ahead and use that for our low res. Oh, okay, no problem. And there you go. And even then, I would save this version before I would smooth it and save over this. I'd always want to make sure my most cleanest and most optimized model is saved. So that was a nice demo. I think that was a nice demo of understanding, how much is enough. So remember, guys, the rule of thumb is always important to know how your object is going to be used. What is your object going to be used in? Is it going to be used for TV, games? Is it a commercial for a specific product? If it's for a specific product, then it's probably going to have to be really, really high res. Let's say like for an electronics commercial or a whatever, any product commercial, guarantee you there's going to be close-ups of it, and you're going to have to increase or smooth that object a lot. Any questions about that process? No?
According to Wikipedia.org, process for other uses, process disambiguation, lookup.
Hey, she wasn't too helpful there. That was I think that was Cortana. Or maybe Alexa, I don't know. I got them both. Anyway, yeah, so your homework, guys, is to do this cube. Take your time. You guys can practice if you want. When you do turn it in, make sure you're giving me this lowest resolution if you want. Some students will like to duplicate this and move it over and then do a couple different versions. Like they'll do this one at a smooth, 1 smooth, and this one will be a 2 smooth, and this one they'll go 3 smooths, just because they're looking at the differences between the two. I mean, really, this difference here, is that the same? Yeah, that's the same. There we go. There's not much of a difference even between these two from this distance. Not horribly wrong. But if you guys do have multiple dice in your scene, please leave your lowest resolution at the origin. And back to that list, also another high recommendation, actually a high rule for the class. Always, always make sure you turn your homework in, not in smooth preview mode, just in one mode, not smooth preview. I'm doing lots and lots of reviews of work from overseas, and they're always turning their work in with the smooth preview on. Smooth preview on is so deceitful. If we turn on smooth preview and we look at this, you're like, oh, look at that. This one looks better than that one. And it's confusing. And then you turn on, then you click on the object, you're like, oh man, they got smooth preview turned on. And then you got to turn this on, and then it never looks the same. We're gonna model a wax candle, And some students will model their entire candle with smooth preview turned on, and then I hit the one mode and it just blows up. You never ever want to rely upon smooth preview for your final work. If it looks good in one mode and you hit 3, it's going to look beautiful in 3. So that's kind of a rule to live by in general. Don't rely upon that smooth preview. Let's see here. What do we got about 12 minutes left. 12 minutes. Trying to think if we have time for the second homework assignment or the third homework assignment. Let's go ahead and do it. Give you guys plenty of things to do this week. Okay, so that is the dice. Let's go ahead and grab our dice. Something else I want to show you guys is down at the bottom left of our channel box is the layers palette. Over here, I don't know if any of you guys use the layers. Layers are great. I'm going to click on the far right button on the layers. You can see what it says, create a new layer and assign selected objects. I'm going to click on that. So now I have the power to turn off the visibility for these objects. I also have the power of clicking on this right box over here. Go to transparent. You can go to transparency, and you can also go to R for reference. And now it's a reference object, and you cannot select it, which is great. There's going to be times when you just want to use something as a reference of maybe the shapes you like, and that's what you'll want to do. Go ahead and put that on a reference layer. Once again, you can turn that on and off. And since we're already talking about, doing things clean and organized, I'm going to go ahead and double click on that word layer 1, and I'm going to change this name to dice. And go ahead and click on save. And now I have my layers with the name on it. I'm all set. I'm going to turn that off. The visibility.
Did you just create layer, or do anything else with it?
Yeah, I
Or
did.
you just pressed the plus button?
No, I did this one over here.
Oh, okay.
The far right one. Because the far right one, if you have objects selected and you select that one, it will put those selected objects into a new layer. If you do the one just with the plus sign, it's just going to create an empty layer. And that isn't too useful. You can always add stuff to a layer. So I created this layer here. So if I wanted to, I could select, say, maybe this guy, and then I could add him to layer 1. I could right click on layer 1 and just go to add selection to object. There. And now that will turn off that one. And that will be those. So really, really powerful, guys. I love using the layers palette because there's times when I'm modeling, I like to do what I like to call experimental modeling. Like I'll get to a rough part and I'm like, I wonder how I should fix this problem, or I wonder how I can go with this. And then what I'll do is I'll take that object, I'll duplicate it, and I'll drop that over into a layer. And then to me, it helps free me. I'm like, well, I can do anything I want now. I can try anything I want. I could try extruding, chopping it up, doing whatever I want. And if it doesn't work, then I just delete it, and I've got my fresh copy that has been untouched over in my layers palette. If things go good, well, then I just delete that other one that I put in the layers. Okay, guys, so what we're going to jump into next, we're going to jump into a ladder. I'm already telling you guys I'm going to go a little bit late today. We did do a long introduction, so maybe about 10 minutes late, 5 minutes late. So we're going to do a ladder. In this ladder assignment, once again, we're going to be going over quite a few tools, some that we've already gone over. So let's go ahead and go to the top view. I'm going to hold down Shift right mouse button and go to polycylinder. I've got a polycylinder there. In the top view, hold down Shift and X at the origin and start dragging out. I'm going to hit F in my perspective viewport, and when I look at this cylinder, this guy has 20 edges going around here, this cylinder. We can look under our inputs in our channel box. Subdivision axis, 20. 20 is a lot. Way too many edges. Remember about optimization. We always want to only use just as much as we possibly need. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease this. I'm going to go ahead, left click and drag in here. I'm going to drop this down to 8. I'm going to take that down to 8. Next thing I'm going to do, I'm going to go to scale. And inside the scale, one thing I want to show you guys is as we look in the perspective viewport, you guys will see that there's the manipulator. We can always scale on the Y, we can scale on the Z, and we can scale on the X, and we can do universal scale. All that's good. Now even more powerful is when we look at our manipulator, there's a little red plane, a blue plane, and a green plane. Whatever that plane is on, the two axes that plane is on, that's how it's going to be manipulated. So if I left click and drag on this plane here, it's only scaling this on the X and the Z. We can see which axes that it's selecting there. Really, really powerful, guys. In fact, I just told a girl at work about this, and she's like, "What? I never knew about that." I was like, "Whoa." I thought everybody who should be working should know this. So this is really, really good. And of course, you can do it with the other ones. So you can scale this. The one I want to use is just the X and the Z. So I'm going to make that a little bit smaller this way. I'm going to jump into my front view. And something I want, I'm going to take the top of my cylinder with my vertex, select the top. I'm going to go to move. I'm going to hold down X, once again X, and left click and drag on the arrow. And when I do this, you guys should see that it's snapping. We'll go with the front view here, nice and close. Hold down X and drag up. It's snapping to each grid line. I want to take that up to my 12 marker there, my 1 foot marker. So that's fine there. So I've got my cylinder. I'm going to go ahead and center the pivot. Center pivot. And now I'm going to duplicate. Control D. And then I'm going to rotate. Go to W. Or I'm sorry, E for rotate. Now we could rotate this. I want this to be at a perfect 90-degree angle. So I'm going to hold down the J key. Once again, J. J is going to let you rotate and snap this. Every 15-degree increments, it's going to snap. So I've got that at 90 degrees. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this and I'm going to snap my manipulator over to the far left. To snap my manipulator to the far left, D as in dog, V as in Victor, and then left click and drag on the X arrow. So I'm going to go all the way over there. Now I'm going to snap this. This is an important one here, guys. I'm going to take this and I'm going to snap this to the center of my vertical cylinder. I'm going to hold down V as in Victor, or V as in vertice, left click and drag on my X arrow, and you can see when I snap that, what it did is it snapped it to the location of this vertice. Not the exact location, but this direction of the vertice. If I go over here, then it's at the middle of my object. And if I turn on X-ray mode up here, this is a good one here too, guys. We have a little X-ray button. We can zoom in, and we can see that we're perfectly in the middle of our cylinder. Here's another tip for you guys for zooming in. I think we all know that you can use your mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Another thing that you can do is you can hold Control and Alt, and then left click and drag. So you're doing like a left click and drag marquee in the area you want to zoom, and then let go. And it will zoom in just to that specific area. So that one's a really, really fun one there. So that's all confirmed there. So that looks good. So what I need to do now, what we have is we have two objects. We have a horizontal and vertical piece of geometry. And what we need to do is we need to combine these two together. Now we're just not going to combine them. We're actually going to combine them and weld everything together. And we're going to use a process called Boolean. Now we're going to be doing Booleans in about 2 weeks, or next week. Your homework for 3 weeks is going to be a Boolean. But we're going to grab both of these guys, and I'm going to hold down Shift right mouse button. Once again, Shift right mouse button. I'm going to go to Boolean, and we have 3 Boolean options. We've got union, difference, and intersection. And we can tell by just looking at the little icons here that what we want to do is we want to combine these 2 objects together. So we're going to go with union. And once we did that, if we look inside the cylinder, I'm going to undo, we can see that the horizontal is intersecting the vertical. And then when we Boolean that together, you can see it has gotten rid of the inside pieces of the horizontal. So now what we should have is we should have one solid object, which we do, because when we select it, it's all green. It's not one green and one white. I'm going to do a smooth preview on this, and I'm going to look at this. And what I'm trying to see is I'm trying to see if there's anything that looks strange. This all looks good on the backside, but here we have something strange going on here. That's not normal. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to 1. We know that there are 8 points or 8 edges going around that cylinder. So we should be able to go to vertex, do a marquee selection of that area, and we should only have 8. And when I look up in my heads-up display, I actually have 9. So that means I have 1 extra point. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to see if maybe I can just do a merge vertices and try to get rid of my problem. So I'm going to go down Shift, right mouse button. Once again, Shift right mouse button, merge vertices, and merge vertices again. I did that. I look up to my heads-up display, 8 vertices. So that fixed my problem. That's wonderful. Now I fixed my problem. I'm going to do a smooth preview. I'm going to look at this. Okay, everything looks good, but that does not look like a piece of a ladder. So let's go back to 1 mode. And we need to make some modifications. Also, too, I look at this and I see that there's an n-gon. Is there anybody that does not know what an n-gon is?
Yeah, me.
Okay. An n-gon is a face that has more than 4 sides. So if we come over here, I'll do going to create a plane. I'm going to hide my grid. So right here we have this is a face, a quad, 4-sided face. That's perfect. That's exactly what we want. Now, if I'm just going to do this quick, not to try to confuse you guys, but to create an n-gon. So now if we look at this, now we can count the edges. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So that has 5 edges on it. That is an n-gon. We never ever want to have n-gons. Very rare occasions will a studio allow you to have n-gons. If they do, they are really trying to hurry up and push a turd out. But yeah, you don't want to have n-gons. So n-gon is a face that has more than 4 sides. So the 4-sided face that I see here is we have 2. We have this right here is an n-gon, right there, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then we have the exact same thing on the other side with this one. So we need to fix that problem. Easy way of fixing that problem is with the multi-cut tool. I'm going to hold down Shift, right mouse button, and go to multi-cut. Now what we can do with multi-cut is we can do just as it sounds. We can start cutting an edge into our object. And as we get close to a point, a vert, it's going to snap there. So I'm not even clicking anything. I'm just moving my mouse around. So it's trying to help us out. So I'm going to go to this red dot right here. And then I want to create a new line over here, but I want it to be really, really nice, clean and straight. So I'm going to hold down Shift. When I hold down Shift, it's going to give me a little black dot. Now what that black dot is, that is the 50% marker of this edge. 50% marker. I'm going to hold down Shift, left click. I'm going to hold down Shift, left click, rotating around to the other side. Shift, left click, and finally Shift. Actually, we don't have to hold down Shift, and then just left click. And now we have that entire little edge drawn around there. Now, once we're happy with it, what we can do is we can hit Enter. Now we hit Enter. Now we don't have any ungons. So the next thing we can do, it's probably going to look the same when we hit Smooth Preview. Okay, still looking bad. So what we need to do is we need to think about our edges. Remember we talked about how close edges are to each other will be how sharp that edge or corner will give the appearance of. So I'm going to go ahead and go in and go to multi-cut. Not only can we cut edges through here, but we can do an interactive insert edge loop tool. So if I hold down Control, no buttons, just mousing around here, I can drag around and I could put edge loops into my object wherever I want them to be. So I'm going to put an edge loop in here. I want one on that side, and I also want one on this side of the middle line. And same thing on the bottom. Now, if we do a smooth preview, now look at that. That's beautiful. That looks really, really good. It looks really, really clean. And now we start to analyze this, and what I start to notice is I have a bit of wasted faces here, because what are these edges here doing? These edges are really not doing anything. From all this over, all those edges are not doing anything at all for us. They're not supporting another edge. They're not helping us keep anything sharp or crisp. It's not helping with distribution of polygons. Just a waste. I'm going to delete all those. Shift right mouse button, delete. Now that's deleted. Now we're going to learn another tool. We're going to come in. We're going to go to Vertex. I'm going to grab one of these vertices. I'm going to hold down Shift right mouse button. I'm going to go to Merge Vertices. And then I'm going to choose Target Weld Tool. Once again, grab a vert, Shift right mouse button, Merge Vertices, Target Weld Tool. Then I'm going to left click on my vertice, and I'm going to start to I'm left clicking and dragging. And whenever you go over to another vertice, it's going to draw an orange line. Now, whichever orange line you stop at and you let go of your mouse, it's going to move and weld that vertice there. I'm going to want this one to go here. And then this one, I'm going to drag that one up. And then let's come over here. And I'm going to drag this one down and that one down. Bless you.
Thank you.
So now we got rid of that, but now we have the evil triangle here and here, and we have it on the other side. Here and here. We don't want triangles. So what we're going to use is we are going to use the multi-cut for this operation. So Shift right mouse button, multi-cut. We're going to go up to this top one, and then we can hold down Shift, 50% marker, and then over here, and that will complete that. Because we're going to do another multi-cut, I can hit the right mouse button. So the right mouse button will keep that tool. And we'll go here. hold down Shift, and then here, and then Enter. Now we got to get rid of this middle line in between the two triangles. Just a fun rule there, guys. If you see two triangles next to each other, then you can get rid of that middle line and it will be a quad. And delete that. Okay, so all that looks good. Smooth preview. Uh-oh, looks like there's something weird going on here. What is that? It looks like I accidentally welded to the wrong area. So I'm going to use that and this, target welding that together. Okay, all that looks good. And that, guys, is going to be this portion of the ladder. So I want you guys to create this, and then next week we'll pick up where we left off. I'm going to go ahead and freeze transformations, delete history. Let's go ahead and assign a color to this. You guys can assign whatever color you want for your ladder. I'm going to go with a nice, lovely purple. And I can grab that, drop that into the layers palette, and call that ladder. Save. I can turn my ladder off, and I can turn on my dice. Oh, that's the world's smallest ladder, or world's biggest dice. And then that's it for today, guys. So let's talk about what our homework is. Our first homework assignment is the toolbox. The second homework assignment is the dice, and the third homework assignment is the this much of the ladder, and then we'll go from here. Please don't try to work ahead, guys. This ladder assignment is in the handouts. The techniques that are in the handouts are a little bit different. If you want to do both of them, that's fine. But don't try to work further with what you've followed with me on the video. And then I will see you guys next week. So same time, same place. Remember, guys, if you guys have any previous work you'd like to share with me of any modeling that you've done, I would love to see it. I talked about how you guys can get a hold of me. Email, no questions, Nicholas. Class is officially over. There are no questions after 3 o'clock. It's 3:09. But because you go to USC, I'll let you ask one question.
For homework submission, do we just send it to you through email?
No, you're actually going to submit that through the classroom.
Okay.
And there should be files, like Maya files or Maya folders.
Well, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to zip everything together. Okay, let's talk about saving, right? We didn't talk about that. That's a good thing to talk about. Let's go up to, we're going to go to File, and we're going to go to Save As, and we're going to talk about naming convention. So naming convention for the class. We're going to call our stuff, it's going to be my first name. I'm going to call it James _ and then whatever you want to call this homework assignment. Maybe week, WK01, homework, or maybe you want to say dice _ ladder _01 because it's our first version. If you've saved before, then it'd be 02, 03, whatever. And then you would save that to wherever that's going to go. And then, yeah, you'll grab your screenshots of your shelf. You'll grab your Maya scene with the ladder and dice. And then you'll zip that together. And then you'll submit your zip in the classroom. By the way, guys, I was just joking about the question. Are there any last questions before we wrap up for today? No? Okay. I will go ahead and when we finish up class, I'll go ahead and start converting the video over, and then you guys will have access to that. Paul. Sorry, I was just reading in the chat box. So Paul says he's going to be in LA in a couple days. Yeah, and that's it. Thank you guys very much for signing up for Hard Surface 1. I hope you guys are looking forward to it. Like I said, the first couple homework assignments are pretty easy, but you can see even just with these two things that we've gone over already, we've already gone over quite a few things. We went over extruding, duplicating. We talked about resolution of objects. We talked about multi-cut tool, the multiple insert edge loop, the target weld tool. We talked about booleans already. So only in one class, we've already talked about quite a bit, guys. We're just going to keep expanding on this. We're going to keep using a lot of these things we're using in week 1. We're just going to keep using more and more and more and more through our process. And I hope you guys are looking forward to the class. Remember, if you guys have any questions or problems, just go ahead and reach out to me. Like I said, Facebook would be the fastest and the easiest way. And I will see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Thank you.